Negative, intrusive thoughts. How much do these really play a part in your manifestation, in ruining things? A lot of you do worry about this. And I get that, because of the way that it is taught in this community. You've got a lot of pressure upon yourself to think positively. There's a big blame culture going on as well, that if something unfavorable has happened in your 3D circumstances, then it's your fault because you weren't thinking positively enough. You had these negative thoughts about they're going to cheat, or that this money is going to be lost, and you ruined everything basically with your negative thinking. And then of course that adds to this pressure of trying to be positive, trying to raise your vibrations, vibrate at the right frequency, and all of this business, whatever the hell that even means. I mean, we're not tuning forks, right? I'm not going to vibrate my way into my desires, but I'm not going to worry about being human and having negative thoughts and bad days, even obsessive negative thinking patterns that, let's face it, a lot of us on this journey suffer with some form of anxiety, depression, OCD, been through trauma. Some of you are just going through grief. You're really attached to this desire. And of course, you're going to have your off days when you have these negative thinking patterns. So how much of these thoughts are going to doom your manifestation? Well, today I'm going to bust through some of these myths about negative thoughts and obsessive thoughts, and how they truly affect your manifestation, if at all. What's the differences between the thoughts that manifest and those that don't? What is the key differences? And what you really need to know in order to stay sane, stay safe, and to be successful in all of this. Because I'm going to share with you examples from my own life. We're going to delve into intrusive thoughts in ways that you have never seen anywhere else and in any other video in this community, I am sure. And we're going to address the reasons why intrusive thoughts are not something to be feared. They're not going to be something that absolutely destroys your manifestations in the ways that you've been taught, essentially. I'm going to share with you things that people don't normally share, either through fear or lack of experience or just not knowing. And I'm going to give you, on top of all of that, if you stay with me to the end, I'm going to give you the tools that you need in order to deal with intrusive thoughts so they don't impact your life in any way. Because let's face it, if they're powerful or not on your manifestation journey is irrelevant. It's very uncomfortable to have them. So I'm going to give you everything you need to deal with them, essentially, okay? Because it's the festive season, feeling generous, so to give it all to you here. So stay with me on this, okay? Make some notes as well, because this video is going to be filled with juicy gems. I want you to collect these juicy gems of information as well, jotting them down in the comments section, because this is how it impresses in your subconscious mind. This is how you start to make these teachings stick, so that you're not constantly going from one video to another and constantly having the same questions crop up. This is actually meant to go in and become second nature. And also it's good for me to see what's resonating with you guys. It really helps me out. So collect those gems just like Henry VIII collected wives. Okay, did you like that? Last time it was, what was it, Pokemon? Now I'm going to Henry VIII. I want to appeal to all audiences, okay? So it's just having one of those days, what can I say? But this is how you truly learn anyway, and it's fun. It's fun to engage, isn't it? So are you ready? Are you ready? Sit back, relax. Have you all got a hot drink? Because this is how we do it here. I've got my Red Bush. I'm really enjoying this tea at the moment. You know, you just have a drink that you consistently go back to at the moment. I'm Red Bushing it. So, stay tuned and sit with me by the fire. Let's cozy up and discuss this, because it causes a lot of anxiety in the community. And I can understand that. You know, so many people come to me. In fact, this is the reason why I decided to do this video in the first place. It was the very fact that I'm getting so many clients lately who are panic stricken about their negative thoughts, and they feel that every time they have these negative thoughts, I'm constantly getting messages of how can I reframe it, or I've started negative thinking, do I have to start all over again? I've ruined it. I haven't ruined anything, okay? So what really drove me to do this video was actually one of my clients in particular, who was a complete mess when she came to me. What had happened was she'd come across this popular content creator. I don't really engage with these other content creators, so I don't really know what's out there at the moment. But she was stating that he's very, very popular, he has a big following, and he happened to say in one of his videos, and I don't know the context or how he might have meant it, but it was essentially along the lines of negative thoughts are dangerous. Your negative thoughts are dangerous to your manifestation. Now, she couldn't stop obsessing over that line, and every thought that she had after that just put her in a state of absolute terror. I mean, you can imagine what it did to her mental health, you know, thinking that every single detrimental negative thought that she had was going to somehow manifest in her reality. And this is the danger of teachings that are rooted in either fear or misunderstandings of the law. You see, there are many people out there, they have good intentions. They've read about the law, so they feel they have an understanding. But to be honest with you, you don't truly understand how this law works until you've actually lived it. I mean, I discovered it back in my 20s, so well over 20 years ago, but could I have taught it back then in my 20s, even after my very first SP manifestation? No. I needed to go over it again and again and experience different conscious creations in order to gain an understanding, in order to see that, okay, I don't need to worry about negatives, I don't need to worry about doubts. Yes, I can still have them and I can still manifest successfully. That's why I get all of you guys to share your success stories, so that you can see this pattern for yourself, because a lot of your questions would be answered, a lot of your fears would dissipate if you would do this. You see, you don't have to worry about every thought manifesting, and I'm going to break it down in this video. Like I said, I'm really going to break it down for you, so that by the end of it, if your anxiety is really crippling you at the moment, then I promise by the end, if you stay with me, it is going to lessen. At least if you've been listening, it will lessen. So try not to worry. I mean, the thing is about some of the stuff that people say, and I've seen it enough times about, yes, you must pay attention to your negative thoughts, you must flip them, you must affirm over them, it's your fault, you're an idiot, you're a moron, you had these negative thoughts, you created this outcome. Imagine what this does for someone with anxiety, with depression, or at least to hear such a drastic word like dangerous. Your negative thoughts are dangerous. It's something that's actually a protective mechanism that's built into us, and I'm going to divulge more in this video. It's a protective mechanism. It's certainly not dangerous, not even in the world of manifestation. But imagine to hear that as someone who is of an anxious tendency of nature anyway. Oh my God, that would destroy me, I think. So this video is going to hopefully be the game changer in all of your questions regarding negative thoughts. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it and what I want to cover. And I'm going to start off by sharing a story. So you're ready for a story time? I'll share a couple of mini stories of my own experiences. You see, as someone who had suffered depression and anxiety to debilitating levels, I was suffering all kinds of things, claustrophobia and agoraphobia and hypochondria, and, you know, in my teens, 20s, it was a hard time. So I'm going to share with you a story from something that happened many years ago. Now, I would always still, despite those mental health conditions, you know, I had a job, I had to work, I would commute, force myself to do the commute. And of course, I would come from my hometown, travel all the way into central London, which is where I was working. This is where I'd have to get the trains. I would have to commute on the London Underground. Those of you who are based in London or have been on the London Underground, you know what I'm talking about. Those trains, especially in the summertime, so claustrophobic. I don't know what they are like now. I don't know if we've even introduced air conditioning yet. Probably not. But you can imagine, I was already quite anxious. Now stick me into a hot, tight space that is underground as well, already exacerbating claustrophobia. And I would constantly have these thoughts. What if I faint and I fall into the train tracks? I even could see it. I was so immersed in these thoughts. So what if I, you know, just collapse and die down here? Like really dramatic, what's the word, like irrational, dramatic and irrational thoughts, like they always are. And I thought this every single day about being crushed, suffocating, collapsing, falling on the train tracks all the time. They weren't just passing thoughts. These thoughts came with a lot of emotional charge, a lot of fear, a lot of paranoia. And yet, in all of those years that I was commuting, and I was commuting for many years, I don't know, 10, 15 years, maybe more, in fact, where I was commuting day in, day out to London, I truly believed, I was believing enough that I was so fearful of it. But you see, I didn't fall on the tracks. I didn't die on the underground. I didn't get crushed to death and in a state of claustrophobia, because my dominant state, my dominant core state of belief was that of survival. I was in survival mode. So a lot of these negative fears were coming into my mind. But really, my core state was that of surviving. I'm going to get to work and I'm going to get home safely. And I had all this fear within me based on my state of anxiety and depression that created all of these negative thoughts that just meant I was very vigilant about everything. But that helped me to get to and from work safely, albeit it made the ride very uncomfortable. The fear was very real, but it wasn't my truth. My truth was, my intention was getting to and from work safely. Another real life example that I'm going to share with you. This is particularly good for those of you actually who are on the SP journey, for example, or love, and you reflect back upon your relationships and you're like, I ruined it because I was thinking all the time that they're going to leave me. You see, it's not as simple as that. It goes much deeper than that. That's why you shouldn't blame yourself about your thoughts. I know that many people out there might blame you and push it upon you, but it's not. It's not. No one benefited from blaming themselves and giving themselves a guilt trip. Okay, so let's just push that aside. You don't need that. But my best friend had very similar struggles to many of you. She was very insecure, very shy, always actually, ever since I've known her since school. And she met her husband when she was 19, or at least the partner that she is now married to. They were 19 years old. And she was always worried. For many years, I remember she had this real worry and anxiety that her husband would be cheating. She would even give him a hard time about it if he came back from work a bit late, for example, or if he had to go to a meeting and it was with a female colleague or something. She would be very, very anxious about it. She really worried that he was going to cheat or leave her for someone else. But you see, these thoughts stemmed from her insecurities. Her insecurities because after she had had their first baby, I suppose postpartum depression kicked in. She didn't feel attractive. She thought that she looked older than her age. She suddenly was a housewife and homebound, which meant that she didn't have any other distractions and stuff. So yeah, she felt pretty down, and her mind wreaked havoc on her with these intrusive thoughts that he was going to cheat, he was going to leave. Yet, despite so many years, because it lasted for years, so many years of these fears, her husband was never ever unfaithful to her. In fact, their marriage never even came close to breaking. They're still together to this day, happily married with more kids in the mix. She's stable, of course, now. But why was it all those years of her negative, intrusive thoughts? Why didn't it manifest like that? Her thoughts were obviously not dangerous, but it was because at the core of it, she believed that her husband was a family man. That's why she ended up marrying him. She knew at the core of it who he was and the dynamic of her relationship with him. She believed in that too. He was very good at comforting her anxieties and bringing her round, so she didn't dwell there too long. But she knew that he would never cheat because he values his children, he loves his children, he loves his life with her, he loves their relationship. And so that was enough to overpower any of these fleeting fears that she had, because it wasn't her truth. It was just her fears that manifested from the state of postpartum depression. Now, I want to address some of these fears that we get, the differences actually, because you'll notice, and I'm going to address this because I know what some people are thinking, but I've had thoughts that have manifest, right? So what's the difference between those thoughts that seem predictive, the predictive thoughts that manifest, and then the fearful, intrusive thoughts that never manifest, for example? So let's look at why, that we might have, I know, a thought about your friend. Why is it you think about your friend and that just effortlessly aligns into your reality? But then you've got your anxious thoughts about worst case scenarios that seem to just remain as harmless noise. It's a difference between something that is a passive thought versus the anxious, intrusive, scattered, crazy thoughts that we get. So in psychology, it's actually a fascinating concept, and it's known as mental priming. When you're relaxed and you're focused, your brain starts to process subtle cues in your environment, things that you don't even consciously notice half the time. For example, you might think about your friend Lucy earlier in the day because you saw something that reminded you of her, albeit subconsciously. It just planted a seed. Maybe it was a mug that you saw in a store window that made you think of her, and you're thinking, oh, I wonder how she's getting on. And then bam, she contacts you because it wasn't forced. It wasn't, there wasn't a strong force or intention behind it. It was very passive. You were able to kind of dwell on it, imagine it with no resistance. Now, let's compare this to an intrusive thought. And as you know, these come from a state of resistance and fear. That's where they're birthed from. It's your brain's locked in survival mode. Let me think the worst to prepare you. So you've got to think of intrusive thoughts as your mind's way of preparing for danger, even though you know that the danger isn't real, even though that you know that you're not in danger. But these thoughts are very loud, they're repetitive, they're emotionally charged. However, they very much lack that quiet focus and intention that is required to influence your reality effectively and consistently. We notice this as well with thought transmission. I mean, how many of you, especially when you're manifesting an SP, and a lot of you will do these different methods and these means to try and project thoughts onto your SP to make them call you or to make someone do something for you or whatever. So thought transmission actually is most effective, or thought reflection, because I often wonder, are we transmitting anything, or is it just that they're reflecting our thoughts back? But either way, the ones that you will see reflected in your 3D reality tend to happen when your mind is calm, it's free of resistance. It's the spiritual teachings as well will describe this as collective consciousness. The experiments on telepathy that have been, these scientific experiments that have taken place with telepathy, actually participants that had strong emotional bonds, that with friends or sisters, twins, they're more likely to experience moments of thought transference. But it's not limited to them. I will just make that clear. However, what is the key here? It's that the thoughts are shared passively, without force. The effortless connection that then creates this alignment. Conversely, trying to force telepathy, like when we're in a state of lack and you're trying to push a thought onto your SP or to anyone else for that matter, it is essentially like mentally yelling at someone to call you, and it rarely works. You will all notice that. Those of you trying to, like I say, get your SP to call, you can push and try, but you will not see it reflected in your 3D. A bit like when you force affirmations, like I say, you will not see it reflected in the 3D as long as you're forcing and pushing things, because that creates tension, and tension blocks the natural flow of your energy. So your thoughts, instead of aligning and being projected or reflected back from someone else, they just remain trapped in your own anxious loop. And this is why intrusive thoughts that are born out of fear, they don't necessarily have the power to manifest in your reality. What was I going to say? I've gone blank then. Because I was just thinking as well, if it would be good to get another reaction, another input on this. And Joey, I don't know if are you around? I want to just get a bit of input, because I'm sharing about negative thoughts, and someone that I was working with was sharing obviously their deepest anxieties over the fact that apparently negative intrusive thoughts are dangerous. They're dangerous. So I was basically saying about the differences as well between thoughts that manifest and the thoughts that don't. The passive kind of thoughts that are without fear and scattered, and a more sort of a quiet intention rather than the scattered kind of thoughts. And the fact that I've had intrusive thoughts for years that have never manifested. So I don't know if you had anything to add to that. See, we get another opinion. It's not just me.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people. I've had sessions with hundreds of people for probably the last 6 years or so. And even myself, I've had intrusive thoughts. I know you've had intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
And I think initially, even myself, when I was a beginner at manifesting, I fell into the trap of being afraid of everything I thought was going to create, because this is kind of the mainstream narrative. But this, again, even for me, and this is what I would relay to individuals as well, based upon my own inexperience. Over the years, however, with being able to talk to hundreds, really thousands of people and receiving feedback from thousands of people and living my life as kind of an experiment of sorts, regardless, with keeping track of everything, it isn't really something to worry about as much as I thought, these sort of either intrusive or negative thoughts, really whatsoever. I think the problem is this fictitious idea that every single thought is going to create our reality. And the sphere of our consciousness is definitely creative, but the manner in which we create is very specific. There's a reason why someone like Neville Goddard would say, go into the state akin to sleep, or imagine with all the tones of reality and repeat it over and over and over again whilst relaxed. And this is because there's a different state of mind that you're in when you're in that sort of relaxed, impressionable state versus that active state, that fearful state, that anxious state. And I think for myself and so many other people, what I've witnessed is, thoughts are really just a reflection of the state that we're in for the most part. And unless we are, even in Neville Goddard's own words, which again, he himself is the guy that I have followed more than anyone else. I've proven that everything that he said is absolutely true. And what he said was creation is really done at night. And the rest, like generally speaking, and then the rest of the day, you're kind of a slave to what you've created the day before. But the reason he says that is not as much as a literal time frame, as much as it is to say it's the mindset that you're in, that relaxed state where you are not anxious, you're not analytical, you're not, you're really relaxed. Your conscious mind, the activity is reduced to a minimum, which is when you can impress the subconscious mind. And when you're in fear, when you're in anxiety, and I've seen this so many times. How many times have I thought something horrible, or I'm going to jump off of this second story thing at the mall, or whatever, these outrageous, ridiculous thoughts that have never transpired ever, and how many dozens of times, to the degree that I can recite them to you, because they've happened so many times, and that has never, ever happened. But versus the times where I've sat down, relaxed, calm, and imagined, now that's more likely. But even one other thing, too, that I find, again, this is with all the hundreds of people, they fear that even when they are going to imagine, if they're in that relaxed state, that they get some intrusive thought that appears out of thin air. So they're in this meditative state and they're imagining their marriage, and then all of a sudden their third party, enters into their consciousness, and then they're afraid now they're going to create. But again, this isn't really how it works, because you're immediately jolted out of that state of peace. You are now in an anxious state, and you're no longer creative at that moment. So I don't know if that's helpful.
That is helpful. Yeah, it is similar to what I was saying as well. But it's just good to get another perspective, because this is a topic that you probably get asked a lot.
All the time.
I've gotten asked a lot as well. And there's just so much.
It's a beginner's mistake to think that that thinking negative thoughts are dangerous. It's genuinely, it's from reading. So in a lot of books, and what a lot of teachers say is they'll talk about concepts, but you've got to look at the whole picture. There's a reason why you haven't created chaos, hurricanes, like all this crazy stuff that enters into your mind after you watch the news, right? We would be in hell right now, if that's the way that it is.
Yeah.
But it's just a beginner's mistake, and over time you realize you don't have to be so afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Thank you, babe. Thank you. So just thought I would introduce another opinion, just because I think coming at it from different angles is a really good idea to alleviate your anxiety, because this is the topic that causes the most angst amongst us, right? So fearful intrusive thoughts, they feel really, really intense, which makes them feel more powerful than they are. It's because they're loud, they're emotionally charged. But remember that they just don't create, or they're not as creative, because you've got a lack of belief behind them, a lack of alignment. You see, it's your beliefs that create, right? So it goes deeper. That's what was happening with my friend. Even though she was fearful of her husband cheating, and it caused her to act out in certain ways as though she was convinced that was going to be the case. The core state, that thought came from a core state, and the core state wasn't that she believed he was that kind of person and that her relationship was in jeopardy. It was more about the postpartum depression. So there's the big difference between the predictive thoughts and the intrusive ones. It's their difference in nature. Like Joseph was saying as well, you've got the predictive thoughts that come from this calm alignment and natural flow. And then you've got intrusive thoughts that are born from fear, noisy, they're distracting, they're chaotic, they're just a shambles, they're all over the place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this with some logic, because I know you guys love a bit of logic. I'm very logic-minded myself, and this, although it's a spiritual journey, we work in harmony with our human side. Not enough people do that. They're not willing to nurture the human side. But we're having a human experience, and this is how I get to change so many of my clients' beliefs so easily, so effortlessly, is because we acknowledge the human side, the logic mind, we work in harmony with it. So think of it this way: if you still have doubts and you're still not convinced, research shows that we have about 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. Don't ask me who counted, but apparently that's the case. Now, I want you to just ask yourself, like, how many of those fleeting intrusive thoughts do you actually see reflected in your reality? If you look at it even from a percentage scale, it would be just a tiny fraction of those thoughts, if at all, right? Every single day you're having 60 to 80,000. So if every obsessive or fear-driven thought was to manifest, as Joseph was saying, as we were saying, the world would be absolute chaos. And this is why it's crucial to understand it's not the fleeting or intrusive thought itself that creates your reality. It is the state that you dwell in most dominantly. So when it comes to intrusive thoughts, which are often repetitive, fueled by anxiety, fueled by fear, they don't really hold any creative power for people unless you repeatedly engage with them and allow them to become your core belief. That's the difference. If you start to listen to those negative thoughts and you create a core belief out of it, convince yourself of it, that's different. But these thoughts are just a symptom, and this is how I want you to look at it. It's important. These gems are dropping. Are you keeping track? But these thoughts are a symptom of the mind's natural problem-solving mechanism. It's not a reflection of your intentions. They are instead a manifestation of your state of being. So Neville Goddard, I'm a big fan of Neville as well. He's the one that stated, a change of feeling is a change of destiny. So in other words, your dominant state, to change that dominant state, change that feeling is a change of destiny. Feel into your state of the wish fulfilled, feeling as though it's done, feeling that you are this now. That's the feeling that you return to the most dominantly. That's what is being expressed. And your thoughts are manifest from that as well. So it doesn't matter if you have the occasional burst of fear or doubt too, because it's always the place that you reside in the most, the state that you reside in the most. And we can take a deeper look at this as well through ancient teachings and science that reinforce this truth. Kabbalion, for example, the principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause. But it's the dominant mental cause, not the random fleeting cause. Again, the cause is the mental realm, not the random fleeting obsessive thoughts. That's actually part of the physical realm. That's key there, okay? Because your thoughts are part of the physical realm, because it's something that can be observed. It's already manifest, so it has no creative power. That's why we say, you know, if it can be observed, it's a manifestation, then it's dead, it's done, it's part of this physical. And you and I know that if we try and mess and push with the physical, we're met with a lot of resistance. That's why I don't fight my thoughts. That's why I don't flip and affirm over my thoughts. That's why, if anything, you might observe them and use them as a feedback, but you always go back to your state and what you're creating in here. That's what matters most from the core of it. Leave the effect alone, thoughts included. Now, science further supports this as well. Intrusive thoughts, especially those arising from anxiety, is generated in the part of the brain called the amygdala, which is the brain's fear center. And it's meant to protect you, like I said, by imagining the worst case scenarios, keeping you alert and ready for action and any possible eventuality that might arise. So these thoughts lack the emotional stability, as Joseph was saying as well. There's no sustained focus required when you're having these crazy intrusive thoughts. They really do lack that focus that is required to imprint upon your subconscious. And this is why most of your intrusive thoughts never manifest, no matter how vivid or repetitive they might get or feel. So you're feeling a bit comforted now. Do you feel a bit better? Let me list some more reasons, okay? Maybe really listing it down is going to help to drill this into you, because I want to make sure by the time I'm done with you all today, you are not going to be fearful of your thoughts, and you're actually going to lord over them. You're gonna boss these thoughts. So number one, as we've stated before, but let's give you clarity in bullet points. So number one, they lack the intentional focus. They're involuntary. For the most part, these intrusive thoughts, involuntary, reactive, non-intentional, and manifestation works more through the deliberate focus and emotional alignment, not the chaos of the anxious mind. You cannot manifest a fear-driven scenario unless you dwell on it, believe in it, and let it dominate your emotional state. So remember that. Number two, like I've mentioned before as well, but this is to summarize, it's not aligned with your core state. So your dominant beliefs about yourself and the world around you, your state of being, that's what shapes your reality. For example, like my friend's situation, or my situation with the train, or any mother with postpartum anxiety, for example, they might have recurring thoughts and intrusive thoughts about something terrible happening to their baby. How many of you were mothers or new mothers, or even actually mothers of teenagers, or parents of teenagers, or fathers of teenagers? I don't think that worry ever leaves you. You'll always worry about harm coming to your child. But despite the intensity of that anxiety, you notice that it doesn't manifest, because at the very core of it, you believe in yourself as being a loving, caring, vigilant parent. And if anything, that anxiety just makes you even more vigilant and aware to your child's needs. Number three, intrusive thoughts reflect fears, not desires. A manifestation aligns with desire and intent, not resistance and fear. Just think of one of the greatest Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, for example, wrote in Meditations, you have the power in your mind, you have the power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. I'm loving these Stoics at the moment. So you have the power over your mind. The mental realm is the only place really that you have the power, you have the control. You collapse space and time. You go within, as per the Hermetic principle, the universe is mental. It all starts with mind. All is mind. We don't deal with the physical world. That's the aftermath, that's the effect. So if I can master my mind, that's what I have the control over. Leave your thoughts, leave everything that is in the physical realm alone. And that's what Marcus Aurelius was referring to. We don't control the physical realm directly in the way that we think we do, in the way that we've been taught. All starts off here in the mind. And you should only ever, as I've mentioned before, treat your thoughts as a feedback loop. just like you do anything in your physical reality. We're supposed to have a level of detachment from our physical reality, aren't we? Because we understand that the 4D is what creates, the mental realm is where we actually create from. So to have that level of detachment and to observe, that's why thoughts are part of the physical realm, because I can observe them. So let me use that as a feedback loop, like I do with everything else in physical reality. And I've got a choice of how I address it. But if I've got recurring thoughts or a pattern with these thoughts, I can ascertain from those thoughts what the core belief is. And then I can go within and I can change that. And as a byproduct of that change, my thoughts will then vanish or dissipate or change as well. I've noticed that, and that to me is the greatest indicator that I have shifted my state, which means that your manifestation is inevitable after that. So focus on feelings, feeling yourself into a state of like security and love and things flowing to you and being in your control. Grounding yourself with mindfulness, redirect to your inner power, allowing it to guide your reality instead of being swayed by these fleeting moments that you get of anxiety. And I know I say fleeting, for some of you it doesn't feel like it's fleeting, because especially when we're of an anxious mindset anyway, it feels like it's all day, every day, but it's not as much as you think it is. It's just the anxiety exacerbates it. So what am I up to? Number 4? The emotional energy that comes with these intrusive thoughts is very temporary. So whilst intrusive thoughts may feel charged, their energy is reactive, therefore transient. Manifestation requires more of a sustained emotional alignment. Like I say, you have to have the right environment in order to impress in your unconscious, and that becomes more sustained. Even if you're not consciously thinking about your desire on a deeper subconscious level, your subconscious is always working, it's always on the go. So there it is impressed and there it is sustained. Whereas intrusive thoughts, they don't have that much power to impress, and they, you rarely achieve that embodiment of the intrusive thought. So instead of fearing your thought, it is crucial to detach from them, as I've said before, and to return to your core state. This is supported by both spiritual teachings and psychological tools, like cognitive diffusion, for example, which teaches you to see thoughts as just passing mental events rather than reflections of your reality. So it's all about how you frame things. So let me list for you now why you don't have to fear your intrusive thoughts and what you can do essentially with them. The human brain is wired, geared to have intrusive thoughts. Like I said before, it's a survival mechanism, so how can it possibly be dangerous? It makes no sense. It's not a manifestation mechanism. Cognitive scientists explain that these thoughts are simply your brain's way of processing possibilities, not predicting outcomes. Dr. Aaron Beck's a pioneer in cognitive therapy, and he emphasized that it's our reactions to the thoughts. Our reactions to the thoughts is what matters, not the thoughts themselves. This is what determines our well-being. So with that, let's remove the fear and the power that you're currently giving to your thoughts. Okay? Are we ready to disempower it? So I know that it is important to reframe and to look at things a certain way in order to disempower them. Because if you are looking at your thoughts as something that can change your reality, as something that can destroy your manifestation, you're going to feel very controlled by them. But remember, we do have a choice when it comes to our thoughts. We have a choice as to whether or not to pay attention to them, to take them as an absolute truth, or to just dismiss them. That is our choice. You choose. Do you want to make it your truth or not? You get to decide. That's how cool this is. So instead, through self-awareness and focused intent, you can really separate yourselves from these transient mental states and don't let it rule your life anymore. Spiritual teachings, coupled with modern neuroscience, agree that our core nature is actually that of stability, of resilience, and intrusive thoughts, natural occurrences in the human mind, but they're not permanent fixtures of our reality. So by recognizing this, you can reclaim your power, your strength, your clarity. Are you feeling that? Are you feeling that? That's one way. That's one thing that you should keep in mind as to why you don't fear this. also remembering that your thoughts are inherently neutral. Because remember what I said, they are part of the physical world. And what have we said before about anything in the physical? It's neutral. There's no meaning to them apart from the meaning that you assign. So if you're in a state of fear and insecurity, you're going to have thoughts that reflect this, that perpetuate this, manifesting as worries, as doubts, as worst case scenarios. Whereas conversely, when you dwell in a state of peace and confidence, your thoughts will align to that with positivity. So think of it that way and shift your state. Another thing you could do or keep in mind as well is that your subconscious mind responds to beliefs, not fear. So fearful thoughts alone do not create, because they're temporary states of mind. As I said before, the Hermetic teaching is man is a thinking center capable of influencing his environment to a great extent if he will do so with knowledge and intelligence. It's something along those lines. If he will do so with knowledge and intelligence. I always remember that last bit, because intrusive thoughts are neither knowledgeable or intelligent. It's always irrational and chaotic, drastic in some cases. And so they only manifest when we choose to adopt them as beliefs. So now I'm going to give you, are you still with me? Are you still with me? Have you got this? Have yourself a sip of your hot drink, okay? Because now we're going to go into the steps to dealing with intrusive thoughts so that they no longer rule you, okay? So let's do this. I want you to acknowledge your intrusive thoughts. So next time you have any intrusive thoughts come up, just acknowledge them, recognize them, recognize it for what it is. You're not trying to suppress it. You're not trying to fight it. As Eckhart Tolle would say, if you haven't read his book, The Power of Now, recommend, but he would say that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind your thoughts. Observe the thought. Okay, so observe them, because you're just the awareness of it. You're not your thoughts. They are not you. They are. They're just manifest. They're part of this realm of it's done. Okay, so I can just observe them and let it pass. I don't empower it. I don't react to it. I don't give it any meaning. I just notice that it's there and I let it go. That's a really good way to deal with intrusive thoughts. Number two, another way that you can deal with it is to, every time that they crop up, use it as a reminder to just gently anchor yourself back into your core belief. By that I mean returning to your dominant state, or the state that you want to make dominant, your feeling of the wish fulfilled, essentially. Imagine yourself back in that scene of everything has worked out for you. For example, if you're fearing failure, and you've got all these intrusive thoughts about you're going to fail and all these things are going to go wrong, your business is going to collapse, no one's going to want to buy from you, whatever it is, then realize that, okay, those fearful thoughts, what they have in common is my beliefs and my core belief about fear of failure that came since childhood. So let me see myself as a success. Let me see myself as the kind of person that rises above challenges, that doesn't worry, and in the face of any hardship actually sees it as an opportunity and flourishes from it as well. Let me do a meditation on that. Let me visualize that. Let me do an inner conversation or scripting, whatever it is that helps you to change state. But go back into that and anchor yourself into that core state. And your intrusive thoughts, like I say, once your state shifts, your intrusive thoughts will dissipate as well. Number three, another method that you can use to dealing with your intrusive thoughts is going to be writing them down. So be careful with this. I don't want you to script them down like, I am so worried that he's going to cheat on me, or she's going to leave me because I'm not good enough. We don't want to write it like that, like we're really scripting it out and reaffirming it. We want to write it in a way that is objective and we're a little bit detached. So fears of failure, fears of disloyalty, fears of whatever it might be. You know, don't I am it, just kind of fears of whatever the intrusive thoughts are. And then once you've got them out, destroy it. Symbolically destroy it. And physically as well. So sometimes just the very act of writing it down and then tearing it up afterwards helps to give that impression that, you know what, I'm purging onto this piece of paper. I'm putting it outside of me rather than having it all floating around inside of me. I'm just going to tear it up, or I'm going to burn it, or I'm going to bury it, whatever resonates with you. But the very fact that you're destroying it, this physical act, helps to disarm the emotional charge behind the intrusive thoughts by taking away their power and taking it essentially out of your body. Another way that you can do it, step number 4, you can use, I can't remember what it was called, but this cognitive diffusion, right? So distinguish yourself from your thoughts. You can just say to yourself, I notice. It's similar to Eckhart Tolle's, like, keeping in mind that, I'll just observe my thoughts. You notice the thoughts and you're just like, I notice I'm having that thought again. And instead of identifying with it, I'm just going to be like, I notice I'm having that thought again. There it is. There's that thought. Oh, well. This creates a level of distance, which reduces the thought's emotional grip. It's a bit like, when I was sharing that story of Helen Hadsell, and how the way that she would cause that distance, that disconnect with her thoughts and her doubts, was to see them as someone else's. That's someone else's thoughts, that's someone else's fears and doubts. That's not mine. And so she wouldn't take ownership of it. I thought that was a great way to do it as well. So anything that helps you to disengage, disconnect from the thoughts is really powerful. Intrusive thoughts, no matter how vivid or repetitive, please remember, they're not powerful enough to shape your reality, not in the way that you think that they are, unless you give them that power. Like with anything, if you give away your power, that's the only time it has power over you. Manifestation works through intention, through focus, through a peaceful mind, alignment, right? That's how it works, not through these fleeting thoughts or these obsessive, scattered fears that you have. So notice this. And it's worth checking in with your core state as well, if the thoughts are intrusive, are regular, are repetitive, and then go through the steps that I've shared with you to counteract these thoughts too, reminding yourself of why you don't need to fear them. And I promise you, over time, it's going to dissipate. I promise you it will. But remember, we all have them. We all suffer with them. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing to be ashamed of. You're not to blame yourself. Please don't blame yourself or guilt yourself or give yourself a hard time. It's not worth it. This is all about learning, and we're all on the journey together. So thank you, everyone. I know that was a lot to take in. I hope that my own input and Joseph's input as well was helpful to you all. And I'll see you in the next video.